When she stood up for a black man against police harassment, an incredible truth was revealed. Emma sat in the corner booth of the diner, her fingers wrapped tightly around a chipped coffee mug, steam curling up toward her face. The hum of conversation buzzed around her, but her mind wandered, haunted by the weight of her responsibilities. It had been 3 weeks since Tom left, and with every parent-teacher meeting, she masked her worry behind practiced smiles. She had to be strong for her kids, her students, her own daughter Claire, but internally she felt her own world crumbling. The thought of even a single ill word getting around town about her choice to challenge authority sent shivers down her spine. Just as she began to mentally navigate the maze of her emotions, laughter erupted from a nearby table, cutting through her thoughts. She wanted to laugh along, but despair sat heavy in her chest. Could a single person ever truly make an impact? The incalculable pressure of lesson plans, grading and keeping a home together pressed on her mind. And then the evening turned dark, the flickering lights giving the room an eerie sense of uncertainty. In the air, an argument formed. A black man, Marcus, was embroiled in a heated exchange with 2 police officers just outside the diner window. A flash of fury ignited inside her. She watched as they loomed over him, shouting, wielding their authority while he stood defensively, hands raised. Emma hesitated. What if she intervened, only to face the wrath of the community she tried so hard to connect with? Her heart raced, indecision gnawed at her as she visualized the potential fallout. 15 minutes late, and you're back here causing trouble again? One officer barked, his voice dripping with disdain. Emma's fingers trembled as she set her mug down, the sudden quiet of the diner feeling heavy. What are you going to do about it? Then the very conflict she thought she could avoid erupted in her mind, the moral compass pulling her towards justice, but anxieties racing to encase her in fear. Did she really have the strength to not only confront the police, but also the very town she called home? As she stepped toward the din, she felt hot, judgmental gazes flaying her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The air thickened as Emma found her voice. Excuse me. She pulled the words from her throat, determined. What's going on here? The officer's eyes flicked toward her, mirrors reflecting confusion and irritation. Murmurs began to echo through the diner, patrons divided. Some slipped into quiet support, while others whispered in allegiance to authority. Emma's pulse quickened. She felt exposed, yet burning with the ache for truth. The next few days unraveled swiftly, the pressure mounting as she unearthed old newspaper clippings and records of injustice buried in Quincy's history. Emma's discovery of familial ties to Marcus felt surreal, a connection deeper than she had ever imagined. But as she peered into this legacy of resistance, threats loomed. She began to wonder if she had put her family in grave danger. Would these revelations bring them together or tear them apart? Emma faced an unbearable question. Could she be the catalyst for change when every step felt fraught with dread? With tensions spiraling in the town, the fight seemed to grow heavier on her shoulders. And then the phone rang, cutting through her thoughts, a reminder that choices come with consequences, and she was ready to confront her heritage, but at what cost? The stakes had evolved, leaving Emma teetering on the brink of a choice that might change everything. Emma answered the phone, her heart racing. It was Marcus, his voice calm, but laced with urgency. Emma, we need to talk. There's something you should know. The tremor in his tone sent a chill through her. She could sense the gravity of that moment. an opportunity for her to delve deeper into the truths swirling around her life. After they arranged to meet, Emma's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What could he possibly reveal that would alter her understanding of not only her family's history, but her own identity? Pacing her small kitchen, she felt the barriers around her tighten. The whispers of the townsfolk echoed in her mind, instilling fear about the repercussions of her actions. Yet the pull to break free from this limbo of ignorance felt too compelling to ignore. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the silhouette of the trees outside, Emma sat on her porch, acutely aware of the shifts in her community. She pondered the faces of the children in her classroom, innocent, hopeful, unaware of the darker facets of their town's history. Could she truly be a force for them? Empathy for Marcus surged through her, intertwining with a growing sense of duty. As she prepared to meet him, she felt the knot in her stomach combined with wild determination. Emma grabbed a notebook, deciding to document the conversation. With each scratch of her pen, she affirmed to herself that this journey was not just about Marcus, or even about standing against the police. It was an exploration of her own convictions and values, a necessary confrontation with her past to build a future she could be proud of. Arriving at the designated meeting place, a small park shrouded in twilight, she spotted Marcus sitting on a bench. He appeared lost in thought, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Emma approached cautiously, her breath steadying as she sat down beside him. "Thank you for coming," he began, his eyes piercing through the dim light. "There's something that has been kept hidden within my family's history. And yours." Emma felt her heartbeat quicken, a mix of fear and curiosity swirling within her. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. "Your great-grandfather," he began slowly. "He was involved in the very resistance efforts that fought against the injustices we're facing today." His words unfurled layers of identity she had never recognized. A rush of conflicting emotions hit Emma. Pride collided with disbelief. The legacy she'd stumbled upon felt like a burden, but also a source of hope. "Why didn't I know any of this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible amidst the stirring wind. Marcus continued, "Because history is often rewritten, swept under the rug. Many choose ignorance to avoid chaos." Emma's heart sank at the realization that complacency was an affliction that had infected her family too. She stared at her hands, knotted with their gripping desperation for clarity. Was her quest for knowledge igniting a flame that could consume everything she held dear? She understood the depth of the choice before her, to confront the comfortable silence of her lineage or to let it fester unchallenged. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steadier this time. Marcus met her gaze, determination radiating from him. "We make this history known, together." As they began to devise a plan, Emma felt embers of courage ignite within her. The truth may be fraught with difficulties and dangers, but it was hers to uncover, her mission to embrace. And yet as they shared ideas about amplifying their message, a haunting thought crept into Emma's mind. What if the town reacted violently to their revelations? The conversation unfolded, touching upon possibilities. Yet under the surface a shadow loomed, reminding her that while she forged ahead, every choice bore risks. Leaving the park, she felt her life pivoting toward a critical juncture, a path laden with uncertainty and awakening. With every step away from the bench, she realized she was no longer simply Emma the teacher. She was now Emma the advocate, a voice ready to challenge deeper truths. But as the night grew darker, Emma heard the faintest sound of sirens in the distance, and a chilling realization hit her. Change would not come without confrontation. The next morning, Emma awoke to a sense of urgency pulsing against her chest. The shrill sound of the alarm clock seemed to echo her inner turmoil. With each beep, she felt the weight of the revelations from the night before, juxtaposed with the reality of her small-town life, a rhythm that felt both familiar and foreign. As she sipped her coffee, her mind spiraled down paths of action and consequence. The question of how to confront her community's silence surged forward. Would her voice echo through the streets, or would it die in whispers? The faint sound of sirens from the previous night still lingered in her memory, intensifying her resolve. It was time to confront her discomfort head-on. She began drafting a letter, channeling her thoughts into clear language. Each word crafted meticulously, she articulated her take on the need for an honest dialogue about history and identity. It was time to break the cycle of complacency, she resolved. The stakes were high, and the approach required a level of courage she had never needed to summon before. Every keystroke felt monumental. Emma realized this letter represented more than just her thoughts. It symbolized her transformation into an advocate. However, a gnawing doubt clawed at her resolve. What if her words incited anger rather than dialogue? The thought made her pause, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was the first hurdle, a significant test of her commitment, but her earlier conversations with Marcus echoed in her mind, urging her to ground herself in the power of truth. The memory of him speaking with such conviction inspired her to push through. Change didn't come wrapped in comfort, it emerged from the fire of confrontation. She hit send. Days passed, each blending into the next as the weekend approached. Emma sensed the tension building within the community. Faces that were once indifferent began to exhibit a nervous energy. At school, the children seemed curious but distracted, and whispers filled the hallways as if anticipation hung in the air. The day she often dreaded had come. The local town meeting loomed ahead, an arena where she would face the guardians of complacency. Emma understood it was more than just a gathering. It was a stage for her and Marcus's truths to be revealed. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and her heart raced as she approached the microphone. When it was her turn to speak, all eyes turned to her, an intense spotlight illuminating her presence. The weight of expectation bore down heavily. As she exhaled, the words began to flow, her voice steady as she recounted her family's shadows and Marcus's burdens. "History is a tapestry woven from many threads," she began. "Ours is a legacy of resistance wrapped in silence. It is time we acknowledged it, both for those who fought and for those of us who benefit from their struggles. What happened last week is not just an isolated incident, it's a symptom of a deeper issue." Her voice trembled slightly but remained firm. The audience's reactions were visceral, some nodding in agreement, others crossing their arms defensively. Emma could almost feel the divide between them and her, highlighting the very conflict she wished to address. As she concluded, an uneasy silence fell. The weight of her words hung in the air, suspended like a block of ice, slowly cracking under pressure. Just as she thought her heartbeats would steady, a familiar face rose from the back. The chief of police. The crowd held its breath, a collective anticipation palpable in the room. "Let me address some facts," he said, his tone icy. "There are laws and order to uphold." In that moment, Emma realized that she was on a precipice, standing at the edge of a confrontation she did not fully understand. The question that lingered was whether this was the moment of awakening or descent into chaos. The tension turned electric. Emma's next move could either shatter the fragile narrative of her community or strengthen it. As she locked eyes with the chief, a familiar shiver coursed through her spine, propelling her to consider the unthinkable, facing the very authority she had spent her life working alongside. "Then let's have that conversation," she said, her voice unwavering, as she prepared to challenge everything she'd known. What consequences lay ahead would spark a chain reaction she could hardly comprehend. The moment had arrived, and it would define not only Emma, but the community she longed to educate and protect. Emma held her breath as the chief of police glared at her, a mixture of disbelief and challenge etched across his features. The room was heavy with tension, and for a split second she wondered if she had crossed a line. Voices thrummed in low murmurs, each whisper thick with skepticism. Standing at the microphone, she felt the burden of expectations weigh heavier, yet an ember of courage ignited within her. "Let's discuss the impact of your actions," Emma continued, her voice gaining strength. "When the police prioritize order over community, we lose the very fabric of trust and safety you claim to uphold." The murmurs shifted, a subtle crescendo that hinted at her growing influence. Emma's heart raced, but rather than retreat into doubt, she leaned into the adrenaline pulsing through her veins. The chief remained unyielding. "What you're suggesting is dangerous. It undermines the stability of our town and the rule of law that keeps it safe." His response hung heavy in the air, but Emma could see it. Cracks beginning to form in the stronghold of conviction that had once shielded him. She had opened a door, just a sliver, enough to let in the light of her truth. "Safety for whom?" she challenged, her determination pooling into every word. "We can't point to laws as our moral compass if they perpetuate injustice. If we ignore what happened to Marcus, we endorse a silence that hurts us all." The echo of her argument ricocheted through the audience. Emma caught sight of sympathetic nods and fearful stares, a tapestry of conflict unfolding around her. She recognized then that her fight was not just against the chief, but the very system that had allowed complacency to thrive. Suddenly, from the back, an elder woman in a patterned shawl stood, trembling yet resolute. "My father faced discrimination when he immigrated here," she started, her voice brittle against the collective tension. "We've been quiet for too long. I agree with Emma." Gasps resonated, and the shift of alignment ignited something in Emma. Each voice of agreement was a thread intertwining with her own, stitching a new narrative into the fabric of their community. The chief's expression morphed from defiance to something that resembled concern. "This isn't an easy conversation," he stated slowly, as if testing the taste of confrontation for himself. "But we have to uphold the law." Emma seized the moment, the rhythm of her purpose carrying her forward. "We cannot allow the law to justify our failures as human beings. Law can be an instrument of power or an instrument of justice. It's our choice how we wield it." Louder murmurs cascaded through the crowd, ripples of support swelling. Emma felt invincible even as dread sunk in. What if this conversation ignited more than voices? What if she sparked a reckoning? As she stood there, the weight of her words curling around her resolve, a realization dawned. Emma was no longer just a messenger. She had morphed into a catalyst for change. But with the escalation of this dialogue came the haunting question: was she prepared for the consequences of such a divergence from the norm? The chief's hand moved towards his radio, a subtle act that instilled fear within her. The crowd fell silent once more as everyone awaited his next move. Emma hesitated, her resolve tested by the possible backlash, yet she recognized that any step back now would betray all that she had fought to build in this moment. She took a deep breath, soul-searching for the final thread to connect them all. "Then let's get to the heart of it," she declared, unwavering. "Let's have that uncomfortable dialogue right now and understand our stories. I'm ready if you are. Will her challenge fracture the walls long built in their town, or will it galvanize the voices that have been silenced for too long?" The air thickened again, each breath a promise of transformation or peril. Emma's eyes remained locked on the chief, her heart drumming in her chest as the silence weighed heavily between them. Could she truly handle the aftermath of this confrontation? It felt as though she stood on the precipice of a canyon, with the rocks below threatening to crumble at any moment. She felt exposed, yet a flicker of determination banished her fear. The pulse of the crowd, with its anticipation and tension, resonated with her own thoughts. The chief released a slow breath, his fingers hovering over the radio, a tangible symbol of the authority he wielded. "You understand that this conversation cannot happen here," he finally said, glancing around the room. "This isn't the place for your ideas." Her chest tightened at his words, but she was resolute. "So when is the right place? In back rooms where decisions are made without public scrutiny. When lives hang in the balance, we must speak out even at the most uncomfortable times." Emma's voice cracked like thunder, and she reveled in the strength it provided. The crowd stirred once more, a wave of energy coursing through them as they began to rise, not in revolt, but in solidarity. She experienced the undeniable thrill of realization. She was not alone. Each shuffling foot, each murmur fed into her courage, reinforcing her stance. Emma scanned the audience, committing every face of support to memory. This was her village, their collective truth clamoring to be heard. A young man from the left spoke up, his voice steady despite his evident nervousness. "Marcus deserves to be treated fairly. This isn't just about laws, it's about people." His statement struck a chord, igniting murmurs that echoed across the auditorium. Emma seized the opportunity like a lifeline. Yes, this isn't about defying the law, it's about redefining it. She pushed through the mounting energy in the room. Too long have we viewed laws as immutable, overlooking the fundamental humanity they should serve. The chief shifted his weight, grappling with her words as his expression tangled with conflict. "You're suggesting chaos, Emma. This could lead to unrest." Emma held his gaze, unflinching. "No, Chief. I am suggesting we explore the very roots of justice and equity together. We cannot fear the discussions that make us uncomfortable. Those are the moments that cultivate growth. If we refuse to engage now, how can we expect our community to heal?" His hesitance began to crumble. Emma noted it, the slow dawning of recognition that perhaps she was right. The crowd shifted again, faces lighting up with hope and resolve, articulating support without words. But within her, an unsettling fear lingered. What if efforts to bridge this divide only fanned the flames of discontent? Emma had to confront this doubt head-on. Was she equipped to guide her town, her family, through the storm she was stirring, or was she merely setting herself up for a fall? "Let's hear the truth," she urged. "What are the stories we've glossed over? What experiences are we too afraid to name?" A woman's voice broke through. "My son was reprimanded for simply walking home from a friend's house. It's an everyday fear we carry." With each testimony, Emma felt the weight of her own uncertainties lift. The room evolved into a chamber of collective struggles, narratives intertwining to form a clearer vision of communal experiences. But just then, a piercing sound fractured the air, the unmistakable crackle of the chief's radio coming to life. "Attention all units, report of a disturbance at the intersection downtown," a voice echoed, cutting through their burgeoning dialogue, slicing through the solidarity. The urgency of the situation clutched Emma's chest. "What's happening?" she demanded, turning to the chief, whose eyes were now filled with a different kind of responsibility. He stared back at her, his expression unreadable. "We have to go." Emma's grip on the microphone tightened, and she stood aware of her decision to engage in a battle greater than anticipated. "You can't just leave. This is our moment." He stepped back, the distance between them a chasm filled with doubt and inevitability. As the weight of their confrontation hung heavy, one thing became clear. She had ignited something. The conversation was only beginning, but was she ready to face the consequences that may unfold in the chaos that followed? A storm was brewing, and Emma sensed that navigating through these murky waters would unveil truths she had yet to confront. Would she rise to the challenge, or become another voice lost in the echoes of fear? Emma felt the air grow thick as the chief turned away, but her heart thrummed with a renewed clarity. The tension in the room, once unyielding, had become electric. This moment, despite its chaos, was crystallizing her purpose. She stepped forward, urgency ripping through her thoughts as she addressed the crowd, their eager faces her beacon in this storm. "Please, let's not lose momentum. We need each other now more than ever. We must understand what's at stake." But even as her words faded into the murmurs of encouragement, Emma felt the weight of uncertainty settle back in. What could she truly do? Was she ready to lean into the discomfort, to stand for those who had been silenced for too long? The chief's voice broke through her internal struggle. "Emma, let's go." His tone was firm, yet she detected a note of reluctance, as if he too was caught between duty and the growing conflict simmering just outside the safety of their gathering. "Don't abandon us!" Emma shouted, clenching the microphone like a lifeline. Her desperate gaze searched the audience, hungry for solidarity. "This conversation is more important than your protocol." The chief's brow furrowed, but he hesitated, clearly torn by her fervor. Emma let the silence hover, sensing an unspoken pact forming among the crowd. They were processing her words, weighing them against the backdrop of what they had all witnessed too often. Then someone in the back yelled, "What are you going to do about it, Chief?" The challenge hung in the air, and Emma watched the shifts on the chief's face, viewing it as an opportunity. It was a moment she could either let slip through her fingers or embrace, igniting the fire within her that had begun to flicker earlier. "Good question," Emma replied, rallying her thoughts. "Are we just going to walk away while others face injustice?" The murmur of agreement surged, a clear signal that they were united in their purpose. Emma's voice grew bolder. "If we leave, what message do we send? That we're fearful, that we know change is necessary, but lack the courage to pursue it?" "Emma," the chief interjected, his voice strained with authority, "we have responsibilities that extend beyond this room. If we don't act now—" "If we don't act now," Emma countered fiercely, "we've already lost. There's a road of fear paved behind us, and it's time we walked the other way." His eyes narrowed but made contact with hers, a silent battle of wills igniting between them. The crowd shifted again, emboldened, now hanging on Emma's every word. "Let's hold ourselves accountable for this moment," she urged. "Not just today, but every day. It is time for reflection and action, not just for the sake of our town's reputation, but for the dignity of every life interconnected through these streets." A profound quiet settled as her words sunk in. Emma exchanged glances with the chief, who remained rigid but contemplative. For the first time in this encounter, she glimpsed a flicker of understanding in his eyes, a potential for partnership she hadn't seen before. Then the radio crackled again, the earlier call for help becoming more urgent. "Attention, all units. Subjects are barricading the main intersection. Additional assistance needed." Emma's heart raced. This was it. The moment she would have to choose. She could either follow the chief or lead her community into something bigger, something transformative. As tension festered in the air, she felt a surge of clarity. "Chief," she said, lowering her voice to draw him in, "if you walk away from this, you may never have a chance to change how our community views you. Together, we can forge a new path." The chief hesitated, seconds stretching painfully as he weighed the choice unfolding in front of them. Would he yield to the urgency of the crowd and her dream of transformation, or would he retreat from the tide of change, sacrificing a pivotal moment for the sake of tradition? The clock was ticking, and so too was Emma's resolve. In this heart-pounding standoff, one truth became clear. This was not just a moment of confrontation. This was a defining crossroads. Emma could either step beyond her fears and influence the chief's decision, or retreat, letting her moment of courage dissolve into the shadows. The choice weighed heavily, and as she awaited his next move, she realized that the ramifications of this encounter could reshape not just her destiny, but the very essence of their community. What path would she choose? Would she embrace her emerging role as a catalyst, battling expectations and fears, or surrender to the daunting reality ahead? Time seemed to stand still as Emma locked eyes with the chief, her pulse echoing in her ears. What if this was her only chance to make a difference? She could feel the crowd's expectations swirling around her like a whirlwind of hope and doubt, pulling her in both directions, toward action or away into safety. The chief's brow was furrowed now, and she could sense his internal conflict, but fear still flickered in the depths of his gaze. How often had he opted for compliance over confrontation, preferring the predictability of the status quo? Emma's heart quickened. She realized she was no longer just advocating for a cause. She was challenging a man to redefine himself and what he represented. "Think about it, Chief," she said quietly, her tone shifting from confrontational to coaxing. "This moment could redefine who you are. It could show that you're willing to stand with people rather than above them." She felt emboldened as she spoke, her resolve solidifying further with each word. The tension in the room thickened, and the crowd held its breath, waiting for the chief's reaction. In this critical moment, Emma understood that her push for justice was intricately linked to his potential for personal growth. She hoped to illuminate a path that both could walk together, but it required him to see beyond his uniform, to embrace vulnerability amidst authority. As silence enveloped them, Emma's mind raced with tactical strategies. Perhaps initiating dialogue wasn't enough. The urgency of the radio crackle had heightened the stakes. She needed to formulate a plan that not only involved the chief, but also encompassed an effective method of action for any unfolding chaos. "Listen," she said, recalibrating her approach. "Whatever happens outside is bigger than both of us, but if you decide to step forward with me, we can face it together, armed with our shared conviction." A glimmer of consideration flitted across the chief's expression. Emma felt a surge of hope surge through her veins, but the ongoing urgency reminded her to stay grounded. She could not afford to become overconfident. Every moment mattered now. With adrenaline pumping, she began to strategize her next steps as quickly as they came to her. She envisioned reaching out to those affected, perhaps by organizing small groups, offering security for those affected by tensions outside, or providing a safe space where their unanswered pleas could be heard. But before executing any plans, she needed to confirm the chief's course of action. Emma took a deep breath, knowing she confronted not just the chief's choices, but their consequences. Whatever happens next, if we stand firm together, we will send a message that the people who wear badges can be a force for justice rather than an impenetrable wall. We don't just patrol these streets, we protect and champion every voice. "Emma," he broke in, the weight of her passion shifting his resolve, "I know my duty, but you're asking for something that goes against everything I've trained for." Her heart sank slightly, but she did not relent. "Or you could be creating a new model. What if you led by example? What if this time doing the right thing becomes your training? It's possible, but it requires your courage. We face those outside, together." The chief's breath hitched, the crux of their conversation hanging like a pendulum. Would he finally embrace the turmoil or double down on tradition? Emma readied herself for a decision. The radio buzzed again, intensifying urgency and the clarity of their crossroads. She understood the gravity of this moment. It demanded action, confrontation, truth. Just then, the unmistakable sound of shouting erupted outside, drowning out all other noise, jolting both Emma and the chief into stark clarity. The time to prepare had evaporated. There was now only the confrontation that awaited them. Would the chief step forth, or would he remain attached to the past, shackling them to inaction? Emma's heart raced, uncertain if her courage would be enough to catalyze his transformation. The moment would define them both. She could either solidify their destinies as allies, or in an instant, unveil the fractures in their ideals. Emma's resolve deepened, and she stood ready, blood pounding in her ears. Outside, history waited anxiously. What would they choose? The air was electric, as if the chaos outside was a living entity pressing against the walls of their makeshift sanctuary. Emma's heart hammered in her chest, the shouting and the distant sound of sirens merging into a maddening symphony of urgency. This was it. The precipice of change lay before her, vibrant and full of possibility, or it could collapse into the abyss of stagnant inaction. "Now or never, Chief," she breathed, feeling the weight of the moment press down on her shoulders. She was no longer merely a participant. She had transformed into an architect of this defining moment. The chief's eyes darted toward the door, the conflict visible on his face. He was grappling with something deeper than procedural rules. It was an internal struggle, a fearful weighing of risks against the fading call for justice. Emma recognized that this was not just about their next move amidst growing tension. It was about a man on the verge of becoming something greater than his past. "Emma," he replied, his voice taut, "you are asking me to risk everything I've built. I wear this badge for a reason. These men and women out there rely on me." "Are you relying on them to stifle courage?" she shot back, clarity mingling with desperation. "What kind of leader would you be if you hid behind protocol when people are suffering? Their cries are not just sounds. They are calls for help that deserve your attention, your action." He faltered, shaking his head as if trying to shake loose the deep-rooted dogma that had been drilled into him. Emma pressed on, recognizing that perhaps she had lit a spark, but needed to fuel it with confidence. "You are more than a badge, Chief. You stand for protection, for justice. If you lead them into a confrontation that inspires hope, you will transform their understanding of what it means to serve," she said, her voice rising with conviction. "Believe in what you strive to embody." The chief's expression softened briefly, and for a fleeting moment Emma glimpsed a man wrestling with his own limitations, a man desperately wanting to do the right thing but encased in years of learned restraint. It beckoned to Emma's understanding of fear. This was not just the fear of conflict, it was the fear of failure, of alienation from those he had sworn to protect. Each moment you remain passive erases the possibility of courage redefining you, she added, her words passionate, laden with urgency. Regardless of the consequences, you can redefine what justice looks like, together. Outside, voices erupted into a cacophony, bringing with it the weight of their suffering, their frustration. Each roar was both a challenge and a plea, beckoning Emma and the chief to step outside their roles. In that exact moment, he seemed to make a decision. She could see it in his eyes, a shifting of tectonic plates within him, a realization that what had been unfounded fear could instead be transformed into action. But clarity brought with it the compulsion for risk, a risk both he and Emma would have to take together. "Let's go," he said, his voice steady, and to Emma's astonishment it was accompanied by a newfound resolve. "But it means we establish parameters. We represent that badge as protectors, not oppressors." Emma nodded fiercely. "Agreed. We will confront the chaos, but we will also give voice to the silenced." As they stepped toward the door, the weight of the world pressed against them, amplifying their heartbeats. The step into the fray was imminent, the fire of action igniting as they prepared to face the crowd, a symbol of change who bore the collective hope of so many. Yet just as they pushed through the door, a sharp crack split the air, startling them both. A haunting uncertainty crawled across Emma's skin. What if this was not the unification she envisioned? What if their courage just led them into greater chaos? Her hand brushed against the chief's shoulder, a silent affirmation of their bond. Together they would face whatever understanding emerged from this moment of vulnerability, ready to forge a new path in the face of unrelenting turmoil. But what lay ahead in the chaos? Would they push through the unknown and find redemption, or would a deeper truth about their roles and the fabric of society unravel before their eyes? The answers would come in the confrontation awaiting them outside. As they stepped into the fray, chaos erupted around them. The sounds of the crowd morphed into an overwhelming wave of chaos, anger and desperation, a tumult that threatened to pull them under. Emma's resolve hardened, but beneath the surface, doubt simmered. What if their confrontation only fueled more unrest? She clenched her fists, the tension coiling in her muscles like a tightly wound spring. Beside her, the chief squared his shoulders, eyes scanning the crowd. His commitment to protect was palpable, but so was the recognition that power came with responsibility. As his gaze locked onto a group at the front, a man gesturing wildly, voice straining against the turmoil, Emma understood that this was their moment of reckoning. "Stay close," he murmured, an undertone of urgency lacing his words. They made their way through the throngs of bodies, pushing past the exchanges of raw emotion. Each step felt monumental, marking territory on a path that was both personal and professional. The air crackled with palpable energy, ignited by both fear and hope. In front of them a young man stood, his face flushed with indignation as he recounted his experience of being stopped by officers. His words were frayed at the edges, soaked in disdain. Emma felt a pull within herself, a dual responsibility to hear this man's voice while also being aware of the chief's position. Here was where the transformation would take place. She caught his eye, silently urging him to remain open, to engage with rather than shield himself from the truth laid bare before them. With an unexpected burst of courage, the chief approached the man, the badge gleaming on his chest under the streetlights. Emma took a breath, the weight of potential confrontation holding her still. Would they fight against one another or unite against the greater threat of misunderstanding? "I see you," the chief began, his voice firm yet empathetic. "Tell me what happened." The young man hesitated, uncertain, then launched into his narrative, each word a battle cry against the oppression he felt. Emma's heart raced as she observed the chief's face, his expression shifting from hardened authority to something resembling understanding. She felt the tension in his frame begin to thaw, revealing layers hidden by years of institutional loyalty. As the crowd began to quiet, a tentative alliance formed in the air between the chief and the angry young activist. Emma stood behind them, a shield and a catalyst all at once. For the first time, she recognized her own growth, the ability to facilitate dialogue instead of merely following it. "What you described is unacceptable," the chief declared to the crowd, his voice rising with conviction. "That is not what our department stands for, and I'm here to listen. We need to change together." In that moment, fortitude surged through Emma. She saw not just a leader rising above the indoctrination of authority, but a human, allowing vulnerability to drive his actions. What she didn't know about him was slowly being revealed. The anger in the crowd shifted, morphing into cautious hope. Eyes that once bore rage reflected a flicker of possibility. Yet beneath the surface of this budding trust, Emma felt the turmoil of doubt. What if this moment dissipated, swallowed by bureaucracy? What if their bravery ignited only resistance from their superiors? The chief had taken a step toward enlightenment, but what would happen when the fog of chaos dispersed and accountability stepped in? As the crowd grew quiet in rapt attention, Emma turned to her partner, his face illuminated with newfound purpose. In that instant, she questioned how far they could push against the tides of institutional resistance together. The echoes of uncertainty loomed large, but she was anchored in the moment, embracing the urgency of the present. The stakes had never been higher, for them both as individuals, and for the community so eager for change. Just then, a figure surged forward from the crowd, finger accusingly pointed, ready to challenge their newfound alliance. Emma's pulse quickened. Would this unforeseen confrontation strengthen their resolve or fracture the fragile bonds they had begun to form? The air thickened with tension as they prepared to face whatever answer unfolded before them. Emma stood amidst the tumult, a newfound strength coursing through her as she witnessed the transformation taking place before her eyes. The chief of police had stepped into a realm of vulnerability, reaching out to the community with a sincerity that was previously obscured by authority. Each moment held the potential for change, a thrilling yet daunting reality that sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. The young man continued his passionate recounting of his experiences, his fervor reverberating through the crowd, while the chief absorbed every word. Emma felt a charged energy shift among them, an awakening that ignited a sense of unity. It was the first time she witnessed the complexities of humanity emerge from behind the veil of badges and uniforms, a glimpse of a shared commitment to reconcile the chasms that divided them. Yet that resolve came with apprehension. Emma remembered the whispers of dissent rumbling within the crowd, apprehensive figures drawn toward the confrontation. Just when she felt the momentum building, a burly man stepped forward, his voice a growl of accusation. "You think we're going to accept this sham? You're just playing to the audience, Chief." The energy around them shifted, a collective intake of breath echoing with uncertainty. Emma felt a sharp pang of fear for the chief's newfound courage. Would this scrutiny dismantle the fragile alliance they'd woven together? She took a step forward, resolute and ready to defend the possibility of change. "Understand that every struggle we face does not erase our desire for justice. This is a collaborative effort," Emma exclaimed, her voice echoing into the tense night. "We are all here to seek understanding. The past has shaped us, but it doesn't define our future." Slowly, the atmosphere shifted again. The audience began to engage. Sides emerged, yet within them lay a willingness to voice their pain. The chief stood beside her, an embodiment of accountability, ready to listen rather than deflect. The tide turned as stories flowed, intertwining grievances and hopes, every voice encapsulating the discontent and fear that had long been muted. Emma felt herself tighten with purpose and clarity. Against the backdrop of raw emotion, she recognized the deep-rooted fears that could easily resurface to undermine their progress. But she became determined. She had already taken a stand, and the ramification of that choice resonated far beyond her expectations. With each individual sharing their story, the young man, the elder woman, the parents who had lost faith, Emma witnessed a tangible transformation in the air. Over the tumultuous din, she caught the chief's eye, understanding flashing between them. They were not just speaking the same language, they were calling for communal healing. After hours of dialogue, the chief took a deep breath, exhaling uncertainty. "It's time we change how we protect and serve," he announced, voice steady, conviction radiating from him. "If our community is hurting, so are we. We cannot stand on the sidelines any longer." As the weight of his words permeated the crowd, an explosion of applause erupted, a microcosm of hope uniting them against a common ideal. Emma stood tall, feeling a heated wave of pride wash over her. They had confronted fear together. They had dared to embrace the uncomfortable truths that had long been buried. In the days that followed, Emma delved into her role as both an educator and an advocate. With her relationship with the chief solidified through this pivotal moment, they coordinated town discussions aimed at dismantling old narratives and fostering understanding. She curated panels, inviting voices from all around, building bridges where walls were once erected. Emma felt transformed. No longer confined by apprehensive thoughts about her community's acceptance, she had reshaped the narrative not just for Marcus or for herself, but for every child she taught. Her stance transformed her into a beacon in her town, someone who gathered stories of resilience to construct a new legacy. As spring unfolded, the town, once entrenched in silence and discord, began blossoming with awareness. The conversations once hidden in the shadows were brought into the light. Hope took root. On a bright April morning, Emma received an invitation to speak at a regional educational summit celebrating her advocacy efforts. Acclaimed not just as an educator, but as a community leader, she refined her presentation. Concrete data intertwined with heartfelt testimony, empowering others to embark on their own journeys of change. Stepping to the podium, a sense of ownership enveloped her. The vulnerability she once feared had morphed into confidence. Emma realized her story, and the stories of many, needed to resonate beyond the walls of her small town, prompting others to address their own truths. This was her moment, her chance to inspire transformation. Emma took a deep breath, the warmth of applause cascading through the audience, and she smiled, ready to ignite a new wave of courage and connection. And with that, a monumental understanding broke through the noise. The power of one voice, amplified by the unity of many, could truly reshape the fabric of society. Emma's journey had become a testament to the strength found in vulnerability, her advocacy flourishing in the echoes of courage that dared to challenge the status quo. Emma had not just learned to stand up, she had shown her community how to rise together. As she concluded her speech, applause enveloped her, a reminder that the duty to continue this work must flourish in the hearts of those willing to listen and act. Now was the time to move forward, and her heart swelled with satisfaction. The work was just beginning, but she had conquered the first of many mountains ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for powerful personal overcoming stories. Don't wait even one more second to share.